Hi again. This is going to be the final video in this series. I've already got more for you to look at than I really intended, but I wanted to have this as a basic understanding before we get to our class session on the 16th. Let me address two things. One is the issue of political versus partisan. And you hear people say, well, that was just a political decision. Uh, well, that's true. Every decision is a political decision. Political meaning there's two sides to the debate. There's the one side, whether you agree with it or not, and then there's the other side, which you agree with or not. You're usually on one side of it. Someone else or some group is on the other side of it, but that's what makes it political. Every decision, even in your own household, even in your own life. Those are political decisions, and so there's nothing wrong, nothing negative being that should be stated by saying, "Well, that's just politics." Decision making is politics. It's taking a perimeter of people around an issue and trying to find common ground in the center of that. We've talked about common ground and higher ground and so forth. But that's what makes them political, is there are different points of view who are trying to come together, and you do it in this public marketplace that we talked about in terms of policy development. So they're always political. There's nothing wrong. When it becomes the foundation, or when it becomes a decision that's framed from an ideology, from a political arm of a group or a group, such as the Tea Party, such as the Citizens for return to the 1940s, to what I call the cave people, citizens against virtually everything kind of thing, then's when it becomes partisan political. Partisan doesn't mean the political parties, but it could. If it's strictly a Democratic issue versus a Republican issue versus an independent party issue or Tea Party or whatever it might happen to be, then it's partisan. If religious issues come into it, it's partisan because all those decisions are political. But the degree to which they follow an ideology or follow a stream that's consistent over time, that makes those decisions political, or excuse me, partisan. In the political world, there usually is not one right decision. There's usually more than one because they tend to be ethical decisions, which means there's more than one right answer. There's more than one right way to do financing of schools. There's more than one right way to deal with truancy. There's more than one right way to deal with accreditation of schools, and so forth. And so in an ethical environment of politics, you're basically searching for the one best fit or the decision that benefits the most people. And benefits them in the way that you intended. Partisanship usually tries to elevate or tries to take the decision to a moral issue, which means black and white, clearly right versus wrong, that kind of thing, and to the benefit of one particular group over another. Every time they try to talk about abortion, it brings out the moral issues, the partisanship, kinds of things. And I'm not saying that it shouldn't bring that up, but it can't solely be made on the basis of morality. You've heard the old term, you can't legislate morality. Well, there are ethical issues that are huge in the debate around abortion. There are huge ethical issues around the issue of prayer in schools. There are huge ethical issues around most any other kind of social debate around which benefiting the most people, doing the greatest good, should be the intent, but then there are many cases in which the resolution of that is almost restricted from being the greater good to the specific good of a specific group because it's been turned into more of a moral kind of issue. And that's tough for people to deal with. People do not want to have to give up their religious backgrounds or religious feelings in order to develop a policy that may not necessarily fit with how they see the world. I'll give you an example of one that I think a lot of administrators have to deal with. may have very specific feelings about the issues of homosexuality in opposition to gay and lesbian relationships and marriages and so forth like that. And I think it's very difficult to not have those in some cases and for some people. But yet, if you're the principal of a school, if you're the superintendent in a school district, and you start to apply that particular ideology or spirituality toward your job that can be shown to be limiting the opportunities of gay and lesbian kids to enter your school and to participate in certain activities, you got a world of trouble headed for you, because things like the Bill of Rights and so forth trump those kinds of things. And so sometimes you have to, in spite of a very strong moral conviction, deal with an issue on an ethical basis. In other words, what's the greater good? That can be very difficult at times, but that's the nature of policy. Again, policy, every decision is political, because you're talking about people around the whole circle on different sides of an issue, trying to find that place in the center that there is consensus or agreement, versus those things where ideology or other kinds of specific understanding, specific principles apply, that makes it partisan in a debate. And partisan isn't necessarily all bad. Sometimes partisanship, the way at least that Republican and Democrat and Independent Party kind of things were supposed to happen, was that it was the parties who would bring those political areas to the table to be vetted and decided. What we've decided, though, is that what's in the center of the table is the advancement of the Republican Party, the Democratic Party, the Independent Party, the Tea Party, the whatever, not are we serving the greater good of the people that we're supposed to be serving. The second point is the issue of lobbying versus advocacy. And we're going to have some groups come later on, I think in April, that do lobbying and advocacy kind of work. Basically, it comes down to, let me get my little trusty board out here so I can kind of show you. You've probably never seen me do this before, but draw this mental model that always looks like, if I can get it here, okay, got that kind of in your head. Very poor drawing, but it's the best I can do here. Is that lobbying has to do with supporting a specific cause, a specific issue. Lobbying in favor of a school finance bill, lobbying in favor of higher pay for teachers, lobbying in favor of a specific bill for a higher pay for teachers, lobbying on the basis of the proposed bill on truancy and attendance, those kind of things. In other words, a specific cause, a specific point of the work of the lobbyist to try to convince or influence the process. Could be to stop it, or could be to move it on. As opposed to advocacy, which is enduring beyond just that specific cause, but has an air of, well, that's the way that organization has always seen these issues. Now, let me give you a specific example. NEA has always lobbied, or always advocated, for higher pay for teachers. But they lobby around No Child Left Behind, they lobby around the testing issue, they lobby around all kinds of things at the federal level, as does the Teachers Association, as does the Administrator Association, and so forth. Advocacy tends to be enduring over multiple issues, whereas lobbying is very singularly specific, and usually the organization lobbying has to go to whoever's paying the bill or asking them to lobby, has to get approval or authority to take a specific position, as opposed to advocacy, which are a set of principles upon which the organization is based, and that those things endure and people kind of really understand them all the time. But you don't go to a hearing to necessarily advocate unless you're basically going to start in a hearing to say, and I'll use an example. The Nebraska Council of School Administrators have always stood for equity of students, and that's been one of our principles of our advocacy. In this particular bill, however, we're doing this kind of thing. So there's a difference in it, and when you look at the point of it with this is that the less lobbying you do, the more people pay attention to your advocacy. The less advocacy you do, you tend to get hooked into doing a lot more lobbying. And so an organization is going to find out that this line up through here is really, I can't do this, opposite. Anyway, the line that's going across up here is the line they really need to pay attention to. And you never get clear down, well, you do get clear down to one end or clear up to the other end. But when you do, you lose out on the ability to do the other. In other words, if basically all you do is lobby every dang bill that comes along, legislators or policymakers are going to say, well, what is it you really stand for? You're in here on this issue. You're in here on that issue. You're in here on every issue that comes along. Is there something that you particularly stand for? On the other hand, if you have a clear nature of what it is that you stand for over here, kind of thing, but never show up on any issue, people are going to say, well, where are you? What does that mean? So organizations find themselves somewhere back in this area right in here. But most effective organizations will find out that their advocacy position is stronger and bigger than their lobbying on any specific issue. In fact, you can sacrifice advocacy if you go overboard in lobbying, clear down here on this end over here. The same is true over here, that if everything is simply about advocacy and nobody knows what the heck you're all about, and let me give you an example. The AARP, most of it, you're not members of that yet, but someday you will be, huge on the advocacy end. But they also go to Congress and to state legislatures when it deals with tax structures, when it deals with issues related to senior citizens and so forth. And their power in lobbying actually comes from the advocacy side of this thing, because they don't show up on every single issue that's there. They don't show up on voter registration. They don't show up on the minimum wage and so forth. They show up when the issues of their advocacy become touched by some lobbying issue relative to benefits to those that are in that age group of their membership. The advocacy side tends to be principle and policy based, whereas the lobbying side becomes cause, position, very specific. I don't know if that is helpful. Sometimes there's not a clear line between the two, but if you're on that slanted line through there, the more you're closer to the end of the larger size of the advocacy, it is very clear that the more effective your lobbying can be. I just remember sitting in hearing after hearing after hearing to hear many of our association groups come in on just about every education bill, to have some senator at some time say, are you ever for anything? Is there anything that you're not against? Kind of thing. And so one of the things that during the STARS implementation, when we had 3 bills to put a state test in place, like we have now, by the way, NSEA could be counted on to be there, and we didn't even have to ask. And they didn't go up and specifically lobby against something. They stood up there and said, here's what we stand for. We stand for teachers leading their classrooms. We stand for teachers being the key people in making decisions about students in terms of what they're learning and how much they're learning and what they need to do and what we need to do to change the kind of system. And rarely ever talked about any specific thing they were against or necessarily for, but they took a position of advocacy. And that was really pretty powerful. They rarely got questioned about what they stood for, but many of the other groups often did. Well, that concludes our series. I hope you have a chance to look at all of these and hope they're meaningful to you. And we'll look forward to seeing you on March the 16th. Thank you.